I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to the Friday edition of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. We are speeding our way into this fine holiday weekend. Dennis, you had the big graduation yesterday. Are you ready for some relaxing 3-day weekend time?
I'm just ready for a relaxing Friday night. I got Monday off after a mild crisis at work with a person calling off that on a particular project that I run. I was able to get all that taken care of. And I'm just hoping everything runs smoothly through the weekend. I'm going to do a little yard work, get a little R&R. You know, I don't know. Have I told you guys my wife and I bought a camper?
Yeah, I think you have mentioned that. So getting ready for the maiden camping voyage.
Oh, hell no. No, we're still in the gutting stage of the renovation. So we did a little bit last weekend, and over the week my son took a truckload of the stuff out of it to the dump. So we'll hop back in. I got to shore up, it kind of it seems like the rotten kitchen was kind of that we tore out was kind of holding the rear end of it together. So I got to go in and do a little preemptive construction before it falls off the rear, falls off the frame. So we'll get that taken care of and finish getting it tore out. And, if we just need to get it down, if we can get it down to the studs, get a new floor in it, then we can use it like a tent.
Well, in addition to, we're going to be looking at AFC running back unit grades today. But in addition to that, we actually, as Dennis predicted on Monday, thanks to, I don't know whether it's because of OTAs or just the time of the year, we actually do have some news. And that starts with today as DeAndre Hopkins was released by the Arizona Cardinals. There's been a lot of talk he might get traded, where he might end up going. Instead, today they released him. He is free to sign anywhere. I'm sure we'll sign somewhere. But Dennis, what does this mean for the Cardinals, and where do you hope to see him land?
Well, it means wheels up for Michael Wilson. Now, I think for the Cardinals are in rebuild. New GM, new head coach, broken quarterback, aging, albeit supremely talented wide receiver with a big contract. Ultimately, I think just nobody wanted to trade for him because he had that big contract and he wasn't willing to renegotiate pre-trade to facilitate a trade. And so, I like the move for DeAndre Hopkins. Since January, I've been saying he's going to end up on the Chiefs. And while, it may be the Bills, I don't think he's going somewhere without a legitimate chance to win a ring and play a big part in it. So I kind of rule out the Baltimore Ravens, though some teams put together a team of vets like OBJ and DeAndre Hopkins, and they try to make it happen. I just don't think the passing volume, as much as they're talking it up, I don't think it's going to be quite there. But honestly, who knows? It could be. And I would really like to see him go to Kansas City, though, man. I think he could put up the wide receiver one season in Kansas City.
I would prefer him not go to Kansas City for purely personal reasons. For the Cardinals, I totally agree with you. There are a lot of questions around them. Kind of makes me wonder if they're going to similarly release Zach Ertz, because I think they were trying to find a way out of that. It would make the most sense for Arizona. Despite what they've said about Kyler Murray being available week 1, I do not think we're going to see him for quite a bit of the first part of the season. It would make sense
I
that
don't know
they
that we
do
see him
something
all year. I think they may just hold him out. His contract doesn't bode well for cutting him. If they cut him after this year, it's got 81 million in dead cap, so that they can't cut him. I mean, you can take on a lot of dead cap, but 30% of your cap is too much, in my opinion. Even
I don't think
expected to go up.
I don't think they want to release Murray. I just think they're going to have to ride out a redshirt year and maybe turn over the rest of the roster. In terms of Hopkins, though, I still think the two most likely, you're not wrong about Kansas City being a possibility. I just hope not for that. But I think the other one hanging out there is Buffalo, who has needed to do something on offense. Well, Gabe Davis isn't it.
I agree with that, but I think honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Arizona is heading into the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. And while they can't just cut Kyler Murray next season, he's not Monty Ossenfort or who's the Jonathan Gannon's guy. And
well, did you see that Jonathan Gannon has the highest odds to be the first coach fired this year? So I'm not sure he's going to get time to pick a guy.
Right. But, I could see them, like, what is it? Murray's contract next year, he has a $51 million cap hit. And by eating all of DeAndre Hopkins cash this year, if they draft Caleb Williams, they could eat half of that salary next year to facilitate trading him. Now, with that big a contract, it's not like you're going to trade him for a first-round draft pick. It's going to be a trade that looks absolutely bonkers. And you're like, why would they trade Kyler Murray for a 3rd round and a 7th round pick and eat $25 million in salary? Well, it's because he's got $80 million on his contract left. And it's just, you just can't, they're going to have to get rid of him. They're going to have to eat contract.
Well, Matt has joined us as well. What were your thoughts about the DeAndre Hopkins news?
I mean, I think you guys pretty much covered all of it, but it's really good for him, obviously, to get that opportunity to go win a Super Bowl. And I mean, I feel like we've been talking about that for months now. I don't think anybody on Arizona is coming back. I think they're going full rebuild. I've said before, I think Kyler Murray's gone next year. I'm with you, Matt. I don't think the coaching staff's back next year. I think this is a complete teardown this year, and they're going to start all over next year with draft. I imagine they're going to be the 1st or the 2nd pick overall. They're taking Caleb or Drake. They're bringing in another coach to coach up that quarterback. It's going to be a whole new regime moving forward.
Didn't Ossenfort hire Gannon?
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, we've also seen them hire. I don't know. Were they the ones that hired
Steve Wilkes?
Yeah, it was only for 1 year, wasn't it?
Yes.
And the
that
49ers.
That was
that was Kime.
But it was it's still that
actually didn't
the ownership and everything, the Bidwells or whatever.
I thought the Cardinals hired their coach before their GM.
I don't remember, but I don't think that maybe I could be wrong. I just don't think that guy is going to be there for long. I feel like this is very much a Houston Texans with what was his name? Is it
David Culley?
Yeah, Culley
or Lovie Smith.
Niners. I don't know that they really hired Tom Sula to fire him after 1 year, but then they ended up doing he just doesn't feel. I don't think that this is a long-term solution for the Cardinals. Like they're bringing him in, do what they can for a year, and that's going to be just a complete teardown, and they're going to try and rebuild with a whole new staff, whole new team, and go from there.
Well, it is the season of rumors and news, and another piece of news we got, Brock Purdy, who underwent pretty significant throwing arm surgery. They're saying he's going to be ready week 1. So, Matt, I'll start with you. Do you buy it?
I mean, I'll believe it when week 1 gets here, and if he's actually out there throwing passes. I mean, the report was that he didn't have a complete UCL tear, right? It was only like a partial.
And that they did some kind of new hybrid procedure that's a little bit easier to recover than Tommy John.
What I will say is, as someone who I'm probably, I mean, I know Dennis, I know your son plays baseball. I don't know how much baseball you actually like professional baseball you actually pay attention to. I am a massive baseball fan, and I've seen that these players go through this stuff, and probably the most recent player that I can remember doing it and having success was Masahiro Tanaka, who used to pitch for the Yankees. I don't believe he's in the MLB anymore, where he did something like that, and he did like a blood platelet thing where like they put some kind of like blood platelet injection, so it's to force blood flow into that to help recover it. And he was okay, but he never really returned to what he was. We'll see. I mean, look, I'm just going to be honest. Congratulations to Brock Purdy with what he was able to do last year as Mr. Irrelevant. It was a shock to everybody. I personally don't think he is a starting quarterback in the NFL to begin with. I think that they're going to give Trey Lance the shot here when it gets down to it. They have to figure out what they have in this guy. They spent a first-round pick on him. Like, at the end of the day, I think that's what it's going to come down to. And then if he sucks, I would not be surprised if Purdy comes back out at some point. I personally would be very surprised if he's starting day one, because I just don't know that that's really an injury. You're going to be able to come out there and he may be okay, but I'm trying to remember how much it was. I want to say Masahiro Tanaka lost 5 to 6 miles per hour off his fastball. It's easier to throw a baseball than it is a football, and it still caused him significant pain at times where he was missing games because of that. I find it very hard to believe that Brock Purdy is going to be back to start the season and good to go and just go out there and run the 49ers to another playoff appearance. So
he's going to go out. He's going to throw 2 touchdown passes every week, man. It's going to be a piece of cake.
Maybe. I don't know.
Christian McCaffrey's going to catch 1,000, run for 1,000.
I do like the 49ers. Or, let me qualify this. I don't like the 49ers, as in they're near and dear to my heart, but when you look at the NFC, I don't know if their quarterback matters as much as it would for some other teams, considering the rest of the roster they built.
I think that's a fair statement.
The other, we had some hot stove kicker news, which I know we're all very excited about. Crushing blow to me, Brandon McManus, the last member of the Super Bowl 50 winning Denver Broncos team, was released and has subsequently signed with the Jaguars. And in punter news, Matt Ariaza, who was pretty notable when he got drafted by the Bills, had a pretty heinous legal situation that caused him to be released before he ever played, has been cleared and is now trying out with teams. Most recently tried out with the Jets. I didn't see any updates that he has signed there. But do you think, I'll start with you, Dennis, do you think he'll be back in the league? And what do you think about the Jaguars getting a better kicker?
You know, I think Areza will end up back in the league because he essentially was found to be not really even there. And
yeah, the charges got dropped. I don't know.
And, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, yeah, I get it. He's a punter. He's not a quarterback like Roethlisberger was or Deshaun Watson, but he seems to be a lot more cleared than either one of those two guys were. So I think he ends up on a team eventually because he was a good punter. Now, that was a year ago. It's been a while since he punted. McManus, you know, is he going to be just as good without that thin air? I don't know. He was a good kicker and had a big leg. Jags are going to score some points this year. I think, he may get some field goal attempts in Jacksonville. I think he's going to kick an awful lot of extra points.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dive too deep into the legal situation with. I think it's Ariza, if I'm remembering correctly.
I couldn't tell based on how it's written.
Because I know in the college world he was considered the quote unquote punt god with how great of a punter he was. So I do think he'll get a shot somewhere if he is I believe he's been cleared of all charges. I mean,
They dropped the charges,
Yeah,
which
that's what I'm
usually
saying.
just means they don't have enough to prosecute.
Yeah, I mean,
It
I know
doesn't necessarily mean
some
he
of
got
the
cleared.
story said that he wasn't there, but then I read some other stuff that it's not necessarily clear. So I'm not going to comment on that stuff. I wasn't there. Well, that is what it is. If he's allowed to be back on the football field, so be it. But I think he will get a job. He is arguably one of the better. I mean, it's a punter, but I do think that he was an incredible punter in college football. So I think he will get a shot in the NFL. And then McManus, I lean with Dennis. I mean, if Lawrence in that offense can continue to improve what they did last year, I imagine McManus is probably kicking more extra points than he is field goals this year.
Sean Payton better win 11 games or I'm going to kick something up his ass. The NFL also agreed to a couple of rule changes, and I'll start with you, Matt, but the two rule changes, essentially kickoff returns, I don't think we're going to see one this year because you can just fair catch and get the ball at the 25, or you let it go in the end zone, get the 25, kind of taking away those pooch kicks that became very popular toward the end of last season. The other one, teams are now allowed to address their third quarterback no matter what and have it not count against their roster cap on game day. So, Matt, what do you make of these rule changes?
I'll start with the quarterback one first because I actually like that one. I do think that's a good thing for them, especially we've seen times where the starters have gotten hurt and then the backups have, and we're having to force a hurt player
the
to
NFC
go out
Championship
there.
game.
Yeah, and that's just ridiculous. So I don't know why they don't just, expand the rosters a little bit. I mean, I was watching an interview with George Kittle recently where he talked about, playing in the NFL is like getting in, 30 something car crashes in one day and then trying to recover from that. And I just don't understand why they don't allow these guys to have more help or backups on the field. But I do like that, especially if it doesn't count against it, so that every team will do it, and so we don't have that situation happen again. As for the kickoffs, I'm very torn on this one because everybody says that's like one of the most violent plays in all of football because you do have one side kind of running full speed at the receiving team. They do this in college football, so it's really not going to affect me at all. I mean, there are times the dudes are catching the ball at like the 10-yard line and waving fair catch, and it's right up to the 25. So I don't think it'll be that big a deal, but I do understand, some of the coaches that came out in protest against it because of the pooch kick, because I do think that also kind of hurts some kickers that were able to do that. That gave teams an advantage that were able to do those pooch kicks and then pin the opposing teams down in their 10 or 15-yard line because they were able to make those kicks, and that does take away part of the game. And I don't necessarily disagree with coaches like Andy Reid who are coming out and say we've done things to make the league and the NFL better, but they're doing a lot of things that completely are taking away what football is. And I don't disagree with him on that. I think, again, I know it's a dangerous play, but these teams and players know that. That's what they sign up for. I think they went a little too far with this one personally. I think if it goes to the end zone, you get on the 25-yard line, great. But now you're telling me you can just fair catch it on the 3? And I don't think I'm with you, man. I don't think we're going to see a kickoff return. Probably moving forward, it will be very rare. And that sucks because it takes away, in my opinion, some of the most exciting plays we've seen. I mean, I go back to, being a Browns fan, Josh Cribbs and what he was able to do for Browns teams that were bad and keeping them in games with some of his kickoff and punt returns. And obviously Devin Hester, who was arguably one of the greatest to ever do it. So it really sucks that they've completely, it feels like, removed that from the game.
Well, I get making the changes for safety, and some of those plays were very exciting. But the truth is, none of those guys are making it to the Hall of Fame. So it's like how
Devin Hester might.
But he didn't. He might.
Yeah.
He might, but he didn't. So that tells you how important the league really thinks those plays are. So it took forever, like in baseball, for a pure reliever to get into the Hall of Fame. I mean, it is what it is. The league evolves. Do we agree with all of their choices? No, but it is what it is. You adapt, and they want offense, and the sheer number of kickoffs versus big kick returns, the number is so small. It doesn't feel like it's going to affect that many plays. it's what? How many kickoff returns do you have for a touchdown each year? A half a dozen, maybe. Punt. I mean, there are some long ones that don't go for touchdowns. So you're talking a dozen, 15, maybe 20 over the course of 32 teams and 17 games each. And so I'm kind of indifferent towards it. I think we just have to adjust and adapt as fans. I get the purist take saying, this is taking so much away from the game. I don't necessarily disagree with that take, but it is what it is. I love the quarterback rule. To be able to have somebody that, so we can avoid having Christian McCaffrey or a Brock Purdy with a torn UCL and not able to throw the ball in a NFC conference championship game. I think that makes good sense. That betters the game. I think too, that's going to, I'm curious, like, who are those guys going to be? It's not going to be rookies. It's the Josh Johnsons that are going to get those roles.
I had a question about that too. The way they originally announced it made it seem like that third quarterback rule applies to the active players you have on Sundays, where you have a 53-man roster, you're only allowed to have 46 active. So if it applies to that, but not to your overall roster, I wonder if we're going to see more. A lot of teams have gone back to only carrying 2 quarterbacks and maybe having one on the practice squad. And you can call people up from the practice squad, but you can only do it, I believe, 3 or 4 times in a season before you have to add them to the regular roster. So it's not like you could keep your third quarterback there, or are they saying that it doesn't matter? That made me curious, as you start to get into cut down.
Well, but they expanded the practice squad during COVID, and they didn't shrink it back down.
No, and you can still call players up each week,
right,
kind of indiscriminately, and you can protect players on your practice squad each week from being poached. But you can only, from what I remember seeing, you can only bring them up to the active game day roster so many times and keep them on the practice squad without having them count against your 53. And while they have talked about the third quarterback not impacting your 46 active, which is great, I didn't read anywhere where it said it doesn't impact your 53 total, which still makes me wonder how many teams are going to carry that third guy. But I guess we will see. Speaking of third and fourth guys, we're looking at running back rooms and not just looking at the starter or the co-starters, but the whole depth of the room to come up with these rankings. Dennis and I were here on Monday looking at the NFC, and today we are looking at the AFC, and there's some interesting backfields. I'll be curious to see how you guys felt about these backfields. I struggled a little bit with putting them in a final order because a lot of them have good points and bad points. But Matt, I will let you kick off and give us your 16 to 13.
Hang on. I forgot to pull the sheet up. There we go. All right. Starting with the 16, I have got the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, I like what Isaiah Pacheco was able to do last year in spurts, and it seems like he is going to be the guy moving forward for the Kansas City Chiefs. But the dude was a 7th-round pick for a reason, and I get, we saw how good James Robinson was for the Jaguars, and he was an undrafted free agent. These guys are just extremely rare to hit. I believe they still brought back Jerick McKinnon, but outside of him,
they have Jerick McKinnon.
They still have CEH on that roster too.
Yes, and
my goodness,
if you believe the camp hype, he looks better than he's ever looked.
All right, you know what? If you guys have seen my softball camp hype, I'm in the best shape of my life and have looked the best I ever have as well. So it's that season. I do not think that either one of those guys are going to really factor in here. So I think it's really just going to come down to Isaiah Pacheco and what he's able to do for this offense. And again, I like him. I just don't think he's really anything special. So they just kind of come in last for me. The only team that I debated on putting last was the Houston Texans. Dameon Pierce had a pretty good year for a rookie last year. I do think bringing in a guy like CJ Stroud is going to help him a little bit. They brought in Devin Singletary in the offseason, who I don't think is a horrible running back. He's not obviously a starter, but I think he's going to be splitting time here with Dameon Pierce. So they came in at 15 for me. Next was the Buffalo Bills, and I was really couldn't figure out where I wanted to rank them. I wanted to put them higher. They just have a lot of Jags on their roster, in my opinion. I don't really know how they're going to use these guys. I really like the signing of Damian Harris. I did a mock draft show with Dave Kluge and Garrett Price last night for the Dynasty Nerd show on the Better Sports Network. And I took him in like the 14th round. And we all started talking about if he stays healthy, I think he could actually be really good for the Bills. It seems like they've wanted this guy who is not afraid to run over defenders and just be tough. That just wasn't Devin Singletary's game. And I personally don't think that they want to keep running Josh Allen at the goal line because he's their franchise quarterback, which is why I think they brought in him. They also brought in Latavius Murray, who fits that mold as well. But I do think Latavius Murray is just a Jag, and I personally do not think that James Cook is going to change this franchise at the running back position. I thought he was very overrated last year. I did not understand why they took him in the second round pick. I think he's a good receiving back, but they also have Nyheim Hines, who plays that exact same role. So it's just a lot of Jags for me. I don't know that anybody really steps up. And then next for me is the Raiders, and this for me is just all Josh Jacobs. And maybe I should have put them higher because of the year he had last year. I believe he finished his RB1 in fantasy last year, was a top running back because of how good he was. And I think they're going to do the same thing again this year. They're going to ride him as much as possible and try and become a playoff team. But, behind him, you've got – I don't even know who Austin Waller is. They brought in Brandon Bolden, Amir Abdullah, Sincere McCormick, Jacob Johnson. None of these guys inspire confidence. So they probably could have been behind the Bills, but I just think Josh Jacobs is going to go out there and have another smash season that kind of raised him up to 13 for me.
So I'll go next. So I agree with you on the Chiefs. There's a reason Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th round draft pick. He's in a great situation, none better, but they brought Jerick McKinnon back, who's going to play that same receiving role. And in hurry up games, you're going to see Jerick McKinnon in there. Edwards-Helaire is who he is. And it wouldn't surprise me if they start letting Deneric Prince say, okay, let's see what you can do. And Pacheco is a really good kick returner. So they could start to siphon off some of his touches if somebody else starts to show a little bit and let Pacheco return kicks to get his quote unquote touches. So I'm not sold on him. They're a pass first team. And they're going to keep passing first. It's Mahomes, it's Kelsey, it's Hopkins. That's what that offense is going to be built around. Trying to will that into being there. I have the Bengals at 15. Joe Mixon is extremely inefficient. As much as I've wanted him to be better, he's had some good seasons, RB4 and stuff. It just isn't there, and they're transitioning to a much more pass first orientation. And when you have Jamar Chase and T Higgins, it makes an awful lot of sense to do that. Mixon was ceding 3rd down touches to Samaje Perine last year. Short yardage, 3rd down, hurry up. They were because Mixon, for whatever reason, all of a sudden isn't good at pass blocking. And then they drafted Chase Brown, who isn't good at pass blocking either. And our lads has Chase Brown as the 2. They have Travion Williams and Chris Evans in the fold as well. It's just honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Joe Burrow throws the ball 750 times this year. I have the Titans at 14. I want to believe that Henry is just going to keep rolling. But that team is in a position right now where they're potentially could be, it could be them fighting with the Cardinals and the Buccaneers for the 101. And, Derrick Henry, he's had injuries the last couple years. He's still big. He's still fast. He's still the focal point of that offense. Hassan Haskins, does not strike fear into anybody. Tyjae Spears, while dynamic, is going to have a short career. I don't expect him to play a long time. Julius Chestnut, Jonathan Ward, the former Cardinals cast-off behind him. I just don't see a lot. I think the Texans are going to be a low-scoring team. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tannehill bounces back and Treylon Burks starts to light it up. But I've got the Texans at 14. And then I have the Raiders at 13. I agree with you, Matt. It's Josh Jacobs, and that's it. Amir Abdullah, no. Brandon Bolden, Zamir White, I think it just – there's not a lot of there after Josh Jacobs. They franchise tagged him. He's going to get, 350 carries, you think? 350 touches maybe instead. He could hit the 400 touch mark between receptions and carries this year. So I've got the Raiders at 13 as well.
For me, I went a little bit different than you guys. My number 16 is the Miami Dolphins. I think they had what I considered to be a makeshift backfield last year, and almost all of them were free agents. And I thought maybe they'd bring one back. They brought all of them back, and then they drafted Devin Achane. So they have five. They have 5 or 6 guys. I don't know what they're going to do with them. I don't know how good I would feel about ever playing any of them. They seem kind of interchangeable and just okay. And so ultimately I dropped them to the 16th spot because nothing about that backfield combination, even though some of them have been decently successful at times, really got me excited. I still don't know what Miami is doing with their running game. 15 for me, Buffalo Bills. You guys have touched on this. I like James Cook okay. I think Damian Harris is okay for what he is. They signed Latavius Murray to be like veteran depth. They still have Hines, who's mostly a kick returner. I just don't. That was a team where I really thought they were going to go do something special at running back. That seemed to be a need for them, and they still haven't. And I don't know how much I believe in either Cook or Harris to be that great. It feels like just kind of a patchwork unit. 14, I have the Chiefs. You guys had them lower. I guess I liked the combination of Pacheco and McKinnon a little bit more. When they started putting those together at the end of the year, they kind of found a groove. Pacheco rushed for 830 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had almost 5 yards per carry as a rookie. He is not going to catch any passes, but he was pretty good for what they asked him to do, and he looked pretty dynamic just running the ball for them in the playoffs. McKinnon, meanwhile, has been in his career a good receiver, and he seemed to fit the role there. He caught 56 passes, had 512 yards, and 9 touchdowns out of the backfield. I don't think either of them is great. And if one of them got injured, I don't think that either of the other one could fill in for them, nor do I totally trust CEH or LaMichael Pirine that are also there on the Kansas City roster. So I don't think Kansas City's backfield is great, but I liked it a little bit better than some of the others. And then 13, I had the Houston Texans. I thought Dameon Pierce had a fairly decent rookie year. Devin Singletary ran for 3,151 yards, 16 touchdowns, and caught 145 passes in 4 years in Buffalo. He can do a lot of things. We've seen him flash at times, but he's never been incredibly consistent, which is why Buffalo was fine letting him go. The rest of their kind of depth, Mike Boone is more of a special teams player. Daria Gunbowale is really kind of a receiver. So I think their backfield is fine, but not especially dynamic. None of the 4 teams that I had in my lowest 4 do I think have a single guy that can do everything that would be a guy that I feel like I could comfortably rely on. Maybe Pierce gets there, but I didn't see enough from him last year to believe it. Dennis, what are your 12 to 8?
So I have the Bills at 12. I didn't get the James Cook pick. He's little Dalvin Cook, 195 pounds. He's not going to run the ball inside with any consistency. Okay, he's a decent pass catcher. I get it. I like the Damian Harris signing a lot, and Harris can catch the ball a little bit too. I just don't think Buffalo's going to use the running backs that much. And Harris, he's in his 5th year. He's on his 2nd contract. There isn't a ton of future there. Behind that, they don't really have much. Let's see, where's the Bills for me? Latavius Murray, again, a Jag. Naheem Hines, special teams. I don't even know who Jordan Mims is that they signed. The Dolphins, I have the Dolphins at 11. A bunch of unspectacular guys, but they're all productive. The biggest issue I have with the Dolphins is knowing which one to play. And maybe Devin Achane solves that because of his youth and ability to stay healthy. But the rest of them, they kind of just cycle through. I feel like, I saw somebody tweet today, if you want to draft the Cowboys starting running back, draft Dalvin Cook. And I think we've heard an awful lot of rumblings that, in about 5 days, Dalvin's going to be a free agent. Maybe that's the case. And if that does happen, I feel like there will be a shakeup in Miami. I think he wants to go there. I think they'd like to have him there. And he's going to be much better than any back that they have. I could see it being a Cook, A-Chain backfield with Dalvin kind of dominating the touches. But as of right now, it's a lot of guys that do the same thing pretty well in that offense, and you just don't know which one it's going to be. I have the Chargers at 10. I love Austin Eckler. I'm happy for him that he got some quote-unquote reachable incentives added to his contract. But the fact of the matter is he's a 28-year-old running back that's pretty touchdown dependent. He did catch 107 passes last year. He's been stomping the boardroom for a big back to take the pressure off him running the ball. And I think if one of those guys finally steps up in Los Angeles, I think that affects Eckler's touchdown production too, because I think they're going to want to start to, if Joshua Kelly starts to hit or Isaiah Spiller starts to hit, they're going to want to reward those guys with some goal line opportunities as well. I feel like Eckler is kind of on his way out of Los Angeles. This may be his last year there. They didn't really seem interested in renegotiating or re-signing him. All right, we'll add some reachable incentives for you, give you some more money. You've been loyal to us. So I've got the Chargers at 10. At 9, I've got the Texans. I like the combination of Pierce and Singletary, clearly better than either one of you guys. I don't think, I still think Pierce is a hashtag 2 to 3 year window, but if they get decent production out of him the next couple of years and they've got Singletary who's been productive as their change of pace back, Mike Boone, he had a couple opportunities to show himself, never really stepped up. Dari has shown himself to be a decent passing down back, but he's not overly dynamic. They'll probably add something to that backfield when cuts happen. They changed when they do the cuts down. Now they go literally from 90 to 53. So there's going to be a huge wave of cuts and then a huge wave of signings with associated cuts as we get ready to break camp. So there'll be some changes in these backfields. But right now, I like what Pierce and Singletary bring as a combination. So that's my 12 through 9.
All right, so I've got the Dolphins here at 12. I mean, I don't love their backfield. I like it. I think I probably could have ranked them a little bit higher. I just wasn't exactly sure what to do with them. I mean, Mostert and Jeff Wilson were effective, and a lot of this comes down to Mike McDaniels, his ability to scheme runs, call a very good run game. But also, I do think adding in Devin Achane was a great move by them. He is a guy who is a legitimate Olympic speed threat. He is that fast. I think he fits perfectly in that offense. On top of that, I think they will scheme to use him in different ways. Like, I think he will probably end up being the guy that most people will use in their starting lineups, and I think that he'll end up being better than, honestly, probably the 3 teams I'm about to talk about ahead of them. But for now, because he's relatively unknown in the NFL level, and him, I would assume, kind of being the third, at least to start out with, I put them here. The Titans, It is all Derrick Henry. I mean, there's no other way around it, but he is still very good. I don't think he's going to fall off. I know some people have said, well, he didn't necessarily look good toward the end of last year. He was hurt. And I mean, I think they're going to rely on him more than they ever have. I shouldn't say ever have. I think Tannehill will be fine, but they're going to rely on Derrick Henry. At this point, I've called for this dude to fall off for like 4 years in a row. And it hasn't happened.
You'll be right eventually.
But I'm gonna just stick with it's not gonna happen. And when he does, I'm like, okay, I guess he's finally gonna do it. He just seems every once in a while we get these guys who are just different, and they just Adrian Peterson was that same one. Like Peterson didn't really fall off until like his last year, and I still think he was averaging like almost 4 yards a carry. He wasn't getting a ton of carries, and we don't remember him being good. But I think, and Matt, I mean, you can double check me on that. I think if you go back and look at his last, he was still actually pretty good. I think Derrick Henry can do that. The problem is behind him, there's absolutely nothing. I mean, I personally don't think Tajay Spears is overly talented. We have just seen these G5 running backs coming into the NFL don't typically succeed. I don't remember who the player was, but there's been like one player that's been really successful over like the past 6-7 years. And Tajay Spears doesn't say to me when I watch this film, yep, I'm going to be the next guy to do that. I think he's an okay running back. I just don't think that he can carry a backfield. And if Henry were to go down, he's not a guy that I think I would start. I honestly think they would be splitting time probably between him and Hassan Haskins. The Patriots are next for me. I think Ramondre Stevenson is fine. They brought in, was it Pierre Strong?
Yep.
Was Kevin Harris were the other two last year through the draft. I think they're probably going to go back to what Bill does best in splitting this backfield in multiple different ways. But I do think Ramondre is going to be the main guy and a guy that you can probably start for 1 year. So that is kind of what put them up here for me. And then the Bengals, I thought they were going to release Joe Mixon. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Look, I mean, he may be inefficient, but he's the best starter outside of Derrick Henry than anybody below him on my list. I just don't, I can't knock that. I mean, he's just good. Like, he's not great. He's never going to be the guy we wanted him to be. We wanted him to be that top 5 running back. It's just not going to happen. But he's still a really good running back. Whenever he's played, whenever he actually plays, he usually finishes within like the top 15 to 20 running backs. Man, that's still pretty good for fantasy. There's 32 of them, and he's finishing up there. And I do think, while I don't disagree with what Dennis said about Chase Brown not being a good pass blocker, Chase Brown is also just extremely athletically gifted. He is extremely fast, really good hands. I think that he's going to bring a different dynamic to that backfield. But outside of those two, there's really not a lot that I like or trust, which is why that they came in here. Because to be honest, I had Joe Mixon above a couple of these starters on the list of teams I have ahead of him, but it was really the Chase Brown and the depth behind him that dropped them down here for me.
So really quick to answer your question, Adrian Peterson's last 3 substantive seasons, 2018 in Washington, 251 carries, 1,042 yards, 7 touchdowns. 2019 in Washington, 211 carries, 898 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4.3 yards per carry. 2020 in Detroit, 156 carries, 604 yards, 7 touchdowns, only 3.9 yards per carry. But you're right, he was still pretty productive. And I remember that season in Detroit, you still ended up having to rank and play him in fantasy a few times. So continuing on for me, my number 12, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. I think we've all been a little bit lower. This is kind of a stretch where I really like some facets of the starter, but I have questions about the unit. Mixon has been great in his career. He's run for 5,378 yards and 40 touchdowns, caught 231 passes in his 6 years with the Bengals. But his production, you are right, sputtered last year. He was less than 4 yards per carry. He often came out on third downs. I don't know who they'd replace him with this year. So he may actually stay on the field more because you're right, Chase Brown, Travion Williams, Chris Evans, a very unproven group that doesn't really excite me behind them. But I also have questions. I have them lower here because Mixon still has some of those off-field issues. And if he was to get suspended, I think Cincinnati for me would dropped to being my number 16 in the AFC. So some questions there. Number 11 for me, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. I like Josh Jacobs. He had a great year last year. He ran for 1,653 yards and 12 touchdowns, caught more than 50 passes for the second year in a row. It was enough for him to get the franchise tag. It was by far his best career performance. It was also the best year in his career or the most touches he's gotten in a career. Does that continue in 2023? He could do that again, could be one of the best backs. They don't seem to be close on a long-term deal. And behind him, not a great group, as you guys have mentioned. Amir Abdullah, Brandon Bolden, Zamir White, Britton Brown. None of that really gets me excited. Number 10, I'm far lower than you guys on the Broncos. I don't know if it's my skepticism. I like Javonte Williams. I think he's looked really good at times. He split his first year with Melvin Gordon, and he really only got 4 games last year. For his career, he's only rushed for 1,107 yards and caught 59 passes. He's looked great at times. He could be poised to explode. He also had a lot of damage to that knee. It wasn't just the ACL. It was all the other ligaments, as they've discussed. Reports vary from him being ready week 1 to some people not thinking he's going to be ready to run full speed until November. Backs also tend to struggle a little bit in their first year back from a torn ACL. And behind him, Samaje Perine looked very solid last year for the Bengals, ran for almost 400 yards, caught 38 passes. They don't have anything behind him. Tony Jones, Demarie Crockett, Tyler Batty, Tyreek McAllister, Jacques Patrick, they're not all making the roster, and I don't know if I feel good about any of them. So I like the Broncos starter. I like the potential number 2, but it was not enough for me to keep moving them up the list. Number 9 for me, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I love Najee Harris. I think he's been very solid the last 2 years. I still have questions about Pittsburgh's offensive line, which I think hampers him and these running backs a little bit. Jaylen Warren looked decent at times last year as a primary backup, but there isn't a whole lot that I feel incredibly comfortable about behind Najee Harris. And we saw Harris get off to a kind of a slow start after he got banged up last year. Will he come back healthy and look better? Will he continue to catch passes like he did in his first season in this kind of offense that they're running now with Kenny Pickett? So I have Pittsburgh a little bit lower than you guys. I had them at number 9. So Matt, why don't you give us your 8 to 4?
All right, so at 8, I feel like this is the biggest difference in our rankings. I have the Jaguars here at 8. I don't love this backfield at all, and maybe this is because I don't think Travis Etienne is necessarily a very effective back. I mean, he had moments last year. There was a couple games where I think he finishes like RB1, 2, or 3. Like, he was incredible. Then you look at some of the other games, and he was finishing as an RB5 or 6. He was extremely ineffective, and I think a lot of that comes to something I said about him when he came out. He is very boom bust. He is a guy who I think vision struggles. If he gets into the open field, he's likely going to score. He's extremely elusive, and he's really fast, but he still struggles catching the ball. I just don't think that he is that good of a running back. I think a lot of that last year came from volume that he had because everybody else on the team was either injured or not able to play. And then they moved James Robinson, was it to the Jets, like almost mid-season, that forced Etienne to become this workhorse for them because they had nobody else. Then they go and they bring in a guy like Tank Bigsby, who I like. I think he's a very good running back. And that's my issue with this backfield. I think these two are going to eat into each other and make neither one extremely effective because Etienne is not necessarily a good pass catcher. Now, he's definitely more explosive than Tank Bigsby, but I think when they get down into the red zone, we're going to see Travis Etienne come off the field and Tank Bigsby come in and start vulturing and see a DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams type thing. You're likely starting Etienne every week, and I think he will put up numbers to get you like an RB2. I just don't think that he's going to be that guy, and he did not rank that high for me as a starter, so that's what dropped him down here, because outside of those two, like, I don't want Quadri Allison. I'm very appreciative of what Dearness Johnson was able to do for the Browns at times. He's not that good. I know Snoop Connor was all the rage last year in preseason camp. He's not good either. JaMychal Hasty, he's not good. Like, there's nobody behind those two, and if either one of those guys gets hurt, then I think you're in for a great season. If Bigsby gets hurt at some point, Etienne's the guy. If Etienne gets hurt and Bigsby's the guy, then you're going to have your RB1. But until then, I think that you're going to see a lot of those very frustrating Philadelphia Eagles backfields we saw where we wanted Miles Sanders to be that thing, and he wasn't because of Doug Peterson's want to use multiple backs. And I think that's what's going to happen here in Jacksonville. Next up is the Chargers. I kind of agree with everything. I think Dennis is the only one who's used the Chargers so far. It's really all about Eckler, but I think Eckler is going to be in for an amazing season just because they use him a specific way. And even though very early on in his career, he was often injured and he missed time recent years while he's gotten hurt, he typically goes out there and plays and he doesn't miss as much time. So I think that you're going to be able to use him most of the time. At 6 for me, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I disagree a little bit with you, Matt, on the offensive line. I think it is better. I think they did a really good job addressing that in free agency. They did a good job replenishing a little bit of that in the NFL draft. They brought in a guy like Darnell Washington, who I actually think is going to be used more as a blocker than an actual tight end. And when he was drafted, he even said, the Pittsburgh Steelers just got their 6th offensive lineman. I think that that's really going to help Najee. And I also think that's really going to help him be more productive in what we saw him do his rookie season, and that is catching the ball. We saw that really go away last year. He was also injured a lot. I think that we're going to see a bounce back year for Najee. I think he's one of the more talented backs in the AFC, and we're going to see him come back to that. The Broncos, the Broncos is my 5 team here. You know, you mentioned all the reports, and maybe I leaned too much into the report that I saw today from, I think is it Josh Palmer? Or I know his last name's Palmer, works at the NFL Network, who said that he's already out there running and cutting. So James Palmer, thank you.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good sign. Now I am with you. Like we've also heard those reports and then those guys are not able to go week 1, but I think Javonte Williams is an extremely talented back. If he's able to play, I think they do have a really good 1-2 punch with him and Samaje Perine. And I think that that's a good thing they brought in a guy like Perine because I think he can come in and early in the season take a bulk of the workload to allow Javonte to get back to full health and then Javonte take over. And as long as both those guys stay healthy, I think it's going to be a really good backfield because I believe in Denver's offensive line. I like Sean Payton. We've seen what he was able to do with Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram. Now, they don't really have the Alvin Kamara on that team right now, but I think that Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams will be very good for you in fantasy. And I just believe in Javonte Williams as a player. He was my number 2 running back in that class. It was fairly separated with him up there too. I just think he's going to be really good if he's healthy, and I'm betting on the health at that point, honestly, because of that report earlier today.
So for me, I have the Patriots at 8. I like what Ramondre Stevenson does, and the big issue with the Patriots is Bill Belichick. We talk about that all the time. I think James Robinson is going to be he's one of the better number 2 backs in the league. He's shown that he can be a 3-down back. Came in as a free agent, and you know they showed Lenny the door. The depth there is more troubling. Now they're talking about Ty Montgomery being this all-world receiving back. Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris. You know, I think it was Lance Zierlein who famously said about Kevin Harris, he catches the ball like it's lava. You know, Strong has a more well-rounded game, but he played very weak competition in college. I think they've got some guys that could be okay, but for fantasy, it's Ramondre, and that's pretty much it. I have the Ravens at 7. I love J.K. Dobbins, but I'm starting to get out a little bit on Gus Edwards. If I had scored Gus higher, they probably would be up. I don't think much of Justice Hill. I think he's a special teamer. Keaton Mitchell came in. He's Justice Hill light. Literally, he's like 180 pounds or something. You know, and they don't really have anybody after that. And they're talking like they're going to throw the ball a lot more. And while it probably shouldn't affect Dobbins, I think it's going to affect Gus Edwards some. It should be good for the passing game. At 6, I've got the Steelers. Love Najee Harris this year. I think he's going to be way up there for me in redraft leagues. I'm good with like if I've got a contending team, I'm good trading high for Najee Harris in dynasty leagues right now. I think, you know, he was a first-round draft pick. the way he's playing, they're going to pick up his fifth-year option. And that doesn't happen much with running backs. But they've added to that defensive line. The passing game is starting to evolve. And I think Harris is going to look good. I'm not overly worried about Jalen Warren taking a lot of work. He's going to get some work. The backup always gets some work. But, I mean, he was an undrafted free agent. He's got quite a hill to climb to be the guy. And I just don't think he's going to be the guy over Najee Harris. You know, Anthony McFarland hasn't shown anything. Jason Huntley. I don't even know who Alfonso Graham is. I need to look at the fifth stringers a little better. And then I've got the Broncos at 5. I think, like Matt, I'm a little bit swayed by the reports that Javante's, well, he's out there sporting that big old brace. He's moving around pretty well with it. A lot of it's going to come down to, you know, his confidence. He'll probably be wearing a brace into the season as he builds up strength and confidence. We've seen with J.K. Dobbins that it's not necessarily a fast comeback. But I think Samaje Perine is going to hold down the fort just fine if Javonte misses the first few games. Tony Jones Jr., you know, he showed a little bit in New Orleans. He's not a real threat. Demarie Crockett, not a real threat. Tyler Badie, he's not a real threat. You know, there's not a lot of depth, but I like the top. I think Samaje Perine is one of the better second string running backs in the league. Doesn't have anywhere near the explosion that Javonte Williams has, but a good all-around back anyways.
If nothing else, you guys are making me feel better about my dynasty teams because I have a whole lot of shares of Javonte Williams and Najee Harris. For me at 8, I have the Cleveland Browns. I love Nick Chubb. He's been incredible. He's not much of a pass catcher, but that may not matter.
The ball.
Well, and maybe he'll get more, but that may not matter because Deshaun Watson typically has not been a huge dump-off guy. They lost incredible depth, I thought, with Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson leaving. And so they're a team where with, Jerome Ford, Demetric Felton, John Kelly, I don't feel incredible about what's behind them, so I dropped them a little bit on here, not a reflection on Nick Chubb. And I've picked up a lot of Jerome Ford, so hopefully he actually is better than I think he is. 7 for me, I have the New England Patriots. I thought Ramondre Stevenson looked really good after Damian Harris got injured, and he got a chance to really go. He ran for 1,040 yards, but he also caught 69 passes. I think that showed that he can be kind of a 3-down workhorse. I think that's why they were fine letting Harris go. James Robinson, you would probably see Ty Montgomery as a pass catching specialist if Stevenson gets injured and they have to run a backfield of Robinson and Montgomery. James Robinson's not bad. He rushed for 1,070 yards as a rookie, probably was on his way to another 1,000-yard season in his second year before he got injured. I think that gives them a pretty good secondary back. I'm with you guys. I'm not incredibly wowed by Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, or J.J. Taylor. Number 6 for me, I have the Chargers. I'm a little bit like Matt. I believe it is pretty much just Austin Eckler, but we're talking about a guy who has been the number 1 running back in fantasy the last 2 years, which seems almost incredible. He's run for over 900 yards both years. Last year was 915 yards and 13 touchdowns. He also caught 107 passes. He's just a great performer. I think it is probably his swan song with the Chargers. I think he's going to play incredibly hard yet again and try to get those incentives in his contract. I don't have a ton of faith in what's behind him, but you never know if Kellen Moore can get something out of Isaiah Spiller. Spiller was a guy that had some people interested and seemed to have some kind of promise going into the draft, ended up slipping in the draft, was non-factor last year. Still curious to see what we see this year. And then number 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I like J.K. Dobbins. I think he and Edwards are a decent 1-2 punch, but Dobbins, he's entering his 3rd year. He's a really talented player, but we haven't really seen that potential get unlocked. He's only run for 1,325 yards in 2 years because of injuries, because of having trouble staying on the field. He's averaged almost 6 yards per carry in his career. I think the potential is there, but I would like to see him be able to stay on the field and keep going. Edwards, had a hard time getting back last year, but theoretically, I think he's a decent second string back, maybe not incredibly flashy, but he's averaged over over 5 yards per carry. In his career, he's run for over 2,500 yards and 13 touchdowns in his 4 seasons there, kind of in a supporting role. It is mostly just them, though. I'm like you, Dennis. I don't have a lot of faith in what's behind him. Dennis, what are your top 4 AFC running back units?
So I have the Browns at number 4. I think we're going to see a little more all-purpose game out of Nick Chubb this year. He's arguably the best pure runner in the NFL. Maybe it's not arguably. He's such a phenomenal running back. But I also think he's a capable pass catcher. They just have never used him in that role. Now, I know they're high on Jerome Ford, and Ford caught the ball well in college. He's a second-year player. He played 8 offensive snaps last year, and he's the number 2 back. So there's going to be some growing pains. I'm okay with Jerome Ford. After that, it gets the score was buoyed a little bit by John Kelly being a not half bad number 4 back, but there's a reason Kelly has never climbed past the number 4 running back on any NFL team. Demetric Felton, there's no there. I fully expect the Browns to sign a veteran, and maybe that impacts Jerome Ford. Maybe it's a guy like a Latavius Murray type that they bring in just to have an experienced veteran, just in case, in case of emergency, break glass kind of running back. But Nick Chubb is the guy carrying the torch for the Browns. I have the Jags at 3, and I don't necessarily disagree with the things Matt said, especially about ETN. I like Tank Bigsby a lot, and I think Bigsby is going to get a decent amount of run, and that's going to allow Doug Peterson to let Travis Etienne do the 3 things he does well, which is be in space, run straight, and not have to make cuts. Okay, so there's only 2 things he does well. But that's going to allow him to be that explosive space back. And Bigsby, I think Bigsby leads the team in carries and possibly leads the team in snaps, but ETN provides the explosive plays. I like Tank Bigsby a lot, and as the number 2 there. I also don't mind JaMychal Hasty as my 3rd string back. When he was pushed into play last season, he showed some explosiveness. I don't think he's a great back, but as a 3rd stringer, you can do a lot worse. And to Ernest Johnson, he's a quintessential special teams guy, fills in when you need him. Not overly athletic, not overly big, but he's a consummate professional. I have the Colts at number 2. I'm out from you guys, and I have the Jets at 1. And when I look at it, Jonathan Taylor is my RB1, and Breece Hall is my RB2. But if we're evaluating the strength of the running back rooms, I think virtually all the backups in New York are better than the backups in Indianapolis, and that kind of gives it just enough to squeeze the Jets past Indianapolis in the running back room rankings. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to have a great year. I think Breece Hall is going to have a great year. But Zonovan Knight, if my choice is between Zonovan Knight and Zach Moss, give me Zonovan Knight. If it's between Michael Carter and Deion Jackson, I think I'm taking Carter, but that one's pretty close. Israel Abanikanda or Evan Hall, give me Abanikanda. So I think it's close, but I got the Jets over the Colts for my 1 and 2.
So at my 4, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, JK finished out the year 120 yards, 125, 59, then 93. He looked like the guy he was before the injury. I think it took a lot of time to get back. I actually think them passing more helps J.K. Dobbins. I think defenses knew that they wanted to run the ball a ton, and that really kind of hurt Dobbins. Now you have them being able to pass, and we still, I think, will have Lamar running a little bit, which should help continue to open up holes for J.K. Dobbins. And they may have lost a step, but he's still an extremely talented running back. I think Dobbins is in for an amazing season. Gus Edwards is what he is. I don't think that he's anything special, but I do think he's a solid backup option. He'll spell Dobbins when needed. But I'm all in on JK having a great year, which is why they come up at 4 for me. At 3, I have the Browns, and a lot of this is probably more related to Nick Chubb. I do think he's the best just pure running back in the entire NFL, and that includes over Jonathan Taylor. His vision, his footwork, his ability to cut, and his ability to burn defenders when he gets into the open field, which Jonathan Taylor does not have. Jonathan Taylor has been caught from behind. Nick Chubb, when he gets in the open field and going, leaves players behind. I do think Jerome Ford is going to be a good Kareem Hunt-esque type player. He is not as talented as Kareem Hunt, but he can catch the ball. He was a decent running back at Cincinnati. Many people may not realize this. He was actually, I believe, a high 4-star, maybe even a 5-star coming out of high school. But due to the transfer portal rules back in the day when he was at Alabama, you had to sit out an entire year when you transferred. And that really kind of hurt him and what slowed his development in getting to the NFL. I think they're going to use him in very interesting ways. I think he's going to be more than a perfect backup and a guy who splits carries with Nick Chubb. As much as I hate this as someone who rosters Nick Chubb in a lot of places, I think we're going to see Jerome Ford startable at times because he will be in that Kareem Hunt role. 2 for me is the New York Jets. So part of this is the fact that, we've heard that Breece Hall, it's been pretty consistent that he will not be ready for the start of the season. So I don't know what we're going to get from him. And I slightly disagree with Dennis on the best backup part. I agree that the Jets have probably the better overall room. But if you're saying, take Jonathan Taylor and take Breece Hall out of the equation, who's the next best running back? For me, it's Deion Jackson, and by a pretty good margin. I do not think Michael Carter is that good of a running back. He's a good receiver, but to me, he is not that good of a running back. Israel Abanaconda's got a ton of speed, really good vision, but he takes 10 steps to make one cut. I do not think that he's very good at that. Zonovan Knight, again, we just talked about this earlier with Isaiah Pacheco. You're a 7th-round pick for a reason. I'm not trying to knock you for how productive he was at the end of the last year for the Jets, but you're a 7th-round pick for a reason. I don't think he's a guy who can carry a backfield. Travis Dye, I liked him at USC last year. I don't know that he's going to play this year. He tore his ACL a week before the Pac-12 championship game. That's in December. I don't know that he's going to be ready to start the season, so that's realistically why they come in as my 2, because if Breece Hall is not ready, I think you're starting Michael Carter, but you're not going to get the production from him I think you want. I think they will split that backfield. It'll be him and Zonovan Knight getting carries, where if Jonathan Taylor's out, Deion Jackson's getting the ball, and we saw Deion Jackson be extremely effective behind Taylor when Taylor was out. And again, I just think Jonathan Taylor is in for a massive, massive season. I love Breece Hall. I had at times had him ranked over Bijan Robinson on the college side of things because I think Breece Hall is just that talented. I think, in all honesty, Breece Hall is a better running back. If you were to compare the two, I would compare Breece Hall more to Nick Chubb and his ability to run the ball, and Bijan more of Saquon Barkley, this incredible athlete that's able to make things happen. Now, he is a better runner than Saquon Barkley, but that's kind of how I viewed the two of them. But Jonathan Taylor is he's a special back. He truly is. And I think having that offensive line improved a little bit, Anthony Richardson there, and him being healthy, I think we're in for a season of him returning back to that RB1 season. And I really like Deion Jackson. I think that he is a great backup. And if you lose Jonathan Taylor, I think he's going to fill in perfectly fine in that role.
All right. Well, for my top 4, number 4, I have the Tennessee Titans. I'm obviously much higher than you guys. And it's all about King Henry for me. I don't disagree that they don't have a lot proven behind them. But I think that that's true of quite a few of the AFC teams. And Derrick Henry in 7 years has run for 8,335 yards and 78 touchdowns. He's a beast on the field. I know he was hurt a little bit last year, but I think he's going to be back. And the Titans passing game has arguably gotten even worse than it was last year. I think they might lean on him more. So it's all about him. He's just so good alone that I vaulted them up there, even though, I'm not completely sold on Tyjae Spears or Hassan Haskins back there. Number 3, I'm like you, Dennis. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. ATN did not play as a rookie due to injury when he got a chance last year. Robinson started the season, but it was actually pretty early in the season in October that they dealt James Robinson over to the Jets. It was mostly ETN, and he mostly carried that backfield. Ran for 1125 yards, 5 touchdowns, caught 35 passes in his first year on the field. I like the talent and the ability. I liked the Tank Bigsby pick. I'm also, like you, Dennis, a little higher on Jermichael Hasty, and I liked Dearness Johnson when he got chances for the Cleveland Browns. I thought he looked good. He was a back that I was interested to see where he was going to go in free agency. I think he's buried here, but in terms of depth, I like them enough that rose Jacksonville up for me. Number 2, we have the Jets. I also wonder a little bit if Hall is a little bit slow coming back. He was injured kind of later into October. It was week 7 of the NFL season when he had his injury. So, and we have also seen some of these backs, it takes them a little while in that first year back. They don't really hit that peak until they're more than a year removed from their injury. I like their supporting core, but I'm a little bit like Matt. I prefer Zach Moss and Deion Jackson to Zonovan Knight, Michael Carter, and Abanaconda. We kind of saw Knight and Carter trying to carry that backfield for the Jets last year down the stretch, and I don't think it always worked for them. It was good enough for me to have them as number 2, but with Jonathan Taylor, who I still think is the best overall back in the AFC, and a couple of guys that, Zach Moss was a 3rd-round pick. He never really hit it in Buffalo. I think he's a guy that probably benefits from a change of scenery. And Deion Jackson, I thought he looked good when he had a chance to fill in for Taylor last year. So they are my number 1 unit in the AFC. So, Dennis, you want to give us your 16-1 really quick?
So I have the Chiefs at 16, the Bengals at 15, Titans at 14, Raiders 13, Bills 12, Dolphins 11, Chargers 10, Texans 9, Patriots 8, Ravens 7, Steelers 6, Broncos 5, Browns 4, Jaguars 3, Colts 2, and Jets at number 1.
How about you, Matt?
My 16 through 10, the Chiefs, Texans, Bills, Raiders, Dolphins, Titans, and Patriots. And then my top 9 teams at 9, the Bengals. Then I have the Jaguars, the Chargers, the Steelers, the Broncos, the Ravens, and my top 3, Browns, Jets, Colts.
And for me, I have the Miami Dolphins at 16, Buffalo Bills 15, Chiefs at 14, Houston Texans at 13, Bengals at 12, Raiders at 11, Broncos at 10, Steelers at 9, Browns at 8, Patriots at 7, Chargers at 6, Ravens at 5, Titans at 4, Jaguars at 3, Jets at 2, and the Colts at number 1. Long holiday weekend coming up. Dennis, if the people have some free time, how should they fill it?
They should go to their favorite podcast platform, give us a rating and review. So after our network we were on shut down, we lost a lot of the information that we had. So our last review was actually from July of 2022. So we could really it'd really help us out if you'd go and leave us a review. Go to Apple, leave us a review. Our last review, well, it was on July 30th. It said, great podcast with great info. Give them a listen. Listen to that dude. He's smart. Another one, great content and easy to listen to. It has great humor without getting off topic. Well, I don't know. Maybe we just tell people what our topics are, so it doesn't seem like we get off. But go give us a rating and a review. Help us get back up the rankings there. Give us a listen. You don't have to listen. Just review, subscribe. We'll take that.
And it is a long holiday weekend, but we will be back on Memorial Day Monday a little bit earlier than normal, and we will be looking at moving on to pass catchers. We are going to be looking at the NFC pass catching groups, wide receivers and tight ends this year, so that there is no confusions or debates. So that's something to look forward to on Monday. Until then, have a great holiday weekend.
Arrivederci.